doing this morning? I hope you're all doing wonderful. If this is your very first time watching me, then welcome. My name is Dr. Michelle, and if you're returning, welcome back. I hope all of you ladies are doing wonderful. I hope that you're all healthy and safe and thriving. Today, I want us to discuss emotional control. I know in my last video, we talked about having an emotional range, being able to manage our emotions, but also show them for those of us who have a hard time showing emotion. But in this video, I want us to get more in depth and really discuss the triggers, the emotional do's and don'ts. This information is necessary because as people, we go through so many emotions. And if you don't have an emotional plan, these emotions can cost you. Okay, they can ruin everything that you've worked for. It doesn't matter how beautiful you are. It doesn't matter how intelligent you are. It doesn't even matter how accomplished you are. Your emotions can destroy all of that if they are not managed. So we have to create an emotional plan, which consists of us really diving into what causes us to become emotional and do's and don'ts when you're in these states. So if you're interested in learning about how to manage your emotions, then sit back, relax, get something to eat, something to write with, and let's jump into this video. I want to start by letting you know that emotions are a beautiful thing. It's wonderful to be able to feel, and it's necessary to be able to feel. Our emotions are our body's natural responses to whatever is going on around us. It's your brain reacting to the environment. And it's a positive thing because it protects you. If there's danger, if there's harm, your brain needs to alert you and get you into that fight or flight mode. And in terms of other things that happen in our lives, our emotions help us to identify what we're feeling and allow us to make better decisions for our lives. So having emotions just allows us to experience the world fully. So I don't want you to feel like you're too emotional and it's a bad thing. The goal is to create an emotional plan before a crisis happens. What you need to know about your emotions is that they are temporary. On top of it being your brain's natural response to things, they also are not forever. Everything in life has seasons. So you may have a time in your life when you are really down. You may have a week in your month where you are really down. You'll also have times in your life when you're really, really happy and you're full of joy. And that also becomes an emotion that people also try to chase, and it also becomes a problem. So ideally, you should be in the center of that and know how to sway from side to side and bring yourself back. So many of us allow our emotions and our moods to dictate our behavior. So if we wake up and we're in a bad mood and we're not feeling it, then maybe we decide we won't go to work, or maybe we decide we won't take care of our children. And these types of things are just so detrimental because your moods are only temporary. And if you do not manage them, they're going to manage you, and everything will crumble. You will see that people will leave your life because dealing with your emotions can become a burden to them. We all have the same feelings, both men and women. We all have the same emotions. It's all about how you choose to handle them. Because emotions come and go, if you're holding on to something, it then becomes a choice. And in turn, you're allowing your circumstances to control you, when truly you are the one that controls whatever happens in your life in terms of how you deal with it. Now, unfortunately, if you live in an area that has a lot of violence and a lot of trauma that you've experienced or the community has experienced, the emotions are not just yours, but they're community emotions that you take upon, and it becomes a lot heavier. And unfortunately, so many ladies in these communities don't receive the emotional guidance that they need to overcome traumas and daily stressors and fears that can overcome them because of their environment. So that's part of the reason why I'm doing this video, because I understand that you may have never received this information, but this information is truly life or death, freedom or captivity. So I urge you to look within and really think about all the things that we're going to talk about. Don't take any of it personally. This is the beginning of growth. So if you don't know this information, if you feel like you've already ruined so many things in your life because of your emotions, be easy on yourself. It's okay. It's important for you to self-evaluate and have self-awareness of who you are and where you're at, because that is the only way that you can begin evolving. The most important thing that you need to know in terms of creating emotional balance and having emotional control is knowing yourself. Really knowing yourself. And this can be very difficult because many of us are not in tune with who we are and how we're really feeling about things. This self-awareness is the first step. It's important for you to be honest with yourself. It does not matter where you come from. It doesn't matter if you live in the hood. It doesn't matter if you live in the best neighborhood in the world. Your emotions are going to dictate what happens to you in life. You can have all of the money in the world, you can have the best man, the best children, the best job, and your emotions can ruin all of that. Okay, it doesn't matter if you're rich or you're poor. If you did come from a household that was very dysfunctional and you're at the point now where you've noticed that and you're at the point where you want to grow, that's a beautiful thing. Listen, when we talk about all the most beautiful and adored gems in the world, they're usually deep, deep down in some dirt. They normally came from somewhere that was very dark and dusty. And guess what? They are so valuable. Once they're dug up, dusted off, and shined up, right? Exactly how do you get to know yourself in an emotional way? You have to start paying attention in your emotional moments. If you're in a situation and you feel that your blood pressure is rising and you're getting hot and you're noticing that you're feeling a little different, you may think that you're angry. And you have to tell yourself, okay, I'm feeling angry. But that anger could also be fear. Maybe you're not angry. Maybe you're actually afraid. Because anger and fear looks almost identical sometimes. A lot of times we are angry because we are really afraid of something. Right? And that's something that's really tricky, and we'll talk about that more later. But you have to be able to identify and feel it. Allow yourself to feel, okay, I'm feeling angry right now. And let the feeling come and sweep over you. Sometimes you may be angry and find out that it's because you're hungry. Your body is feeling a sensation and it's manifesting in a sharp tongue or nasty response because you're hungry. Okay, that is a valid reason to be upset. Your brain is wondering where your food is, but it's not an excuse to overreact or be insensitive or rude. So when you realize that you're hungry, you can say, okay, I'm feeling hungry right now. I probably shouldn't talk until I get some food. This is not an easy thing to do by any means. This stuff is really, really difficult. That's why people who are able to manage their emotions are usually very successful, because they've mastered and disciplined themselves to feel and release. So in order to feel and release, you have to identify what it is you're feeling so that you can tell your body, okay, we're on the same page. I got it. This is what we're feeling. Now I'm gonna let it go. And I'm going to take care of it. Now, there will be times when you feel something and you don't really know exactly what you're feeling. You don't have the emotional vocabulary. If you don't have the vocabulary to identify what you're feeling, that can put you in frustration. You do need to know emotional words and understand them. But a lot of times, especially with us women, there are things going on internally that are causing us to have these reactions in terms of hormones. Hormones play a large role in your emotions. So if you haven't explored how your hormones are affecting you, then I invite you to do that now. If you're doing things like taking birth control, that is going to affect your emotions. You may find that you are extremely sad for no reason, just extremely sad. You may find that you have a lot of outbursts because you just have like this very short fuse for some reason. And it's coming from the hormones. These hormones are also packed in things like emergency contraceptive If you take a Plan B pill, don't be surprised if you have some serious emotional issues right after, because they're jam-packed with hormones. The same thing goes for PMS. You may be watching a movie and you find yourself bawling, crying, or you're on the phone with your man and he tells you something very, very, very basic and it gets you into this whole emotional rage. And I'm talking rage. I'm talking you feel like you are out of control of your reaction. And that could be because of your hormones. Same thing if you just had a baby. These things are real. They're happening in your body and they manifest. They're not an excuse, so I don't want it to become a reason for you to mistreat people or a reason for you to act out. But they are biological things that are happening that need to be identified and managed. So if you realize that, you know what, for some reason today I was just so emotionally out of control, I don't know why I cried so hard, check your calendar. As a lady, you should be tracking your menstrual cycle. You should be tracking your ovulations, all of it. And I have an app that I love called Life. It's a, simple app. I'm not being sponsored. I just downloaded it and it works. It's great. And it tracks everything. So I can look at it and say, oh, no wonder. That's why I'm acting like this. Because it doesn't feel like yourself. You don't feel like yourself. You know this is not who you are. On the flip side of that, there are some things that we do know, and they're just sitting right there. They're buttons that are just like, push me, and they're called triggers. We all have emotional triggers, certain things that every single time it's going to get you. And I think triggers are so interesting because, when you know someone really, really well, like my sister, I know her triggers, and when I want to push her buttons because I'm upset about something, I know exactly what to say to get her to act out. And that's not a good thing. Your buttons should have a glass case over them where people cannot just access them and push them. But you need to know what those triggers are. You need to know what those buttons are so that you can put them in their beautiful glass cases. Otherwise, you're going to wear them right on your shoulder and people are going to bump into them and push them left and right. And you're going to be mad all day long or crying all day long because your buttons are just available for people to push. So you want to develop emotional maturity. You want to be able to protect those buttons, know what your triggers are so that you can manage them and people cannot control you like a robot. And the way that you discover your triggers is by realizing your patterns. This is why I urge you so often to journal, to take some time and just jot down how you're feeling. I promise you, you start doing this, it gets it off of your mind, onto paper, and you start to look at the patterns. For example, I don't like being yelled at. I don't like when people raise their voice. I don't care if you just happen to have a loud voice, if you're not really upset. If you raise your voice during a regular conversation, it's a trigger because I don't like being yelled at. I don't think anyone needs to yell. So if I know that and I'm in a conversation with someone who maybe is my boss or in a position where I do need to be able to receive that information without an emotional reaction and they're yelling at me, I realize, okay, you know what? I don't like being yelled at. And I save it. I just save it. For some people, their triggers could be a person. Maybe your ex or your child's father. If he reaches out to you, can I see my son this weekend? And you're at work and you're like, oh, I can't stand him. And now you're upset when you're in a professional environment and you can't even get yourself out of that loop because you're now thinking about this person that you don't like that just reached out to you. And it stifles you. And it may not even be him reaching out to you. It could be someone even talking about him. It can be your son talking about him. And that triggers you. Just the fact that your son brought him up. Sometimes our emotional triggers are just so inappropriate and unrealistic that they have to be managed, okay? If you don't like him, but it's your son's father, he's going to talk about him. He's going to love him. It's his dad, right? So you have to manage your own emotions so that other people don't have to manage them for you. And when I talk about emotional maturity, this is something that is very serious if you have a blended family or if you're in a very unique situation in your dating life. It could be something as simple as seeing the person's ex. Okay, you maybe have a reaction because you saw someone who used to date someone that you dated, which logically doesn't really make sense. You know, as long as that person is not still in communication, that shouldn't be a trigger. But I cannot tell you what your trigger should and shouldn't be. There are things that you have to look at, evaluate, and make sense of. Make logical sense of, so it's not affecting you. Some people's emotional triggers could be tied to food. There could be certain foods that you eat that remind you of a certain time in your life that you really didn't want to remember. And when you smell it or when you eat it, it causes an emotional response. You may not even realize that it was a food or it was a certain scent, but all of a sudden you just don't feel good. These are emotions that you need to pay attention to. And for some of us, our emotional triggers are tied to certain times of the year or certain events that maybe were traumatic or unfortunate. Maybe someone passed away at a certain time of the year, and as that time starts approaching, you realize that you're very depressed or you're extremely anxious because it's a reminder and you have to relive it. And that can really trigger you. Okay, so you have to be able to start looking within and looking at the patterns. Why do I get sad every New Year's Eve? Oh, maybe because something happened in January and you have to remember that January is coming up. I know in my life there was a time where I was very triggered in the morning. If anyone were to talk to me like on my way to work, I would snap at them because I was always like rushing and running late. So I realized that I need to leave way earlier or wake up way earlier so I can be calm and relaxed on the way to work, when I get to work, so I can be the best person for myself and for everyone else. Because if I'm experiencing emotional anxiety and I don't know why in the mornings I'm just always on edge, that's going to affect my entire day. That can cause me to get into a car accident. It can cause me to spill my coffee on myself. It can cause me to forget things at home because I'm anxious, I'm jittery, I'm rushing. Something as simple as rushing can cause you to have emotional outbursts because you're anxious, right? So you have to take a look at yourself and you have to evaluate, what is it in my life that is causing me to act this way? But everything cannot trigger you. You cannot walk around this world and blame people for pushing your buttons. You're responsible for that. I can say the same thing to 10 different people and they can feel 10 different ways about it. It is not what I'm saying. It is how you are receiving it and interpreting it and digesting it. So don't allow your buttons to be exposed and for people to be able to push them, because if they can push them, then they can control you. And you're not a robot. People shouldn't be allowed to decide how you feel at any given moment. That should be your decision. Okay, in order for you to have that security over your emotions, you have to understand them and you have to accept them and learn how to process them. Now let's talk about some emotional don'ts. These are things that I do not want you to do when you get emotional, because these are things that can truly destroy everything that you worked so hard for. The first thing is, do not make decisions when you're feeling emotional. Whether or not you know what you're feeling, it doesn't matter. If you're extremely happy or extremely upset, that is not the time to make big decisions. So don't go out and buy a car when you're super excited. Don't break up with your boyfriend just because you're upset. This is serious because a lot of women do this. When we get into this emotional state, we say anything and we make these decisions on the whim and then regret it right after. And other people do not deserve to be the victims of your emotional outbursts, especially your partner. Usually the person closest to you is going to experience you in a very different way than the world will. And it's unfair for them to get the worst of you. So same thing at work. If you're angry about something or you're emotional about something, maybe you feel slighted or hurt, that is not the time to send an email. That is not the time to call someone and tell them how you feel. That is the time for you to process and figure out what is actually bothering you and sit on it. Do not suppress your emotions. I talked about feeling, allowing yourself to feel. Feeling is a wonderful thing. Even if it's not the best feeling, it's good that you know how to feel, as long as you can get yourself out of it. So don't stuff your emotions down and pretend you don't have any. That's something that a lot of women get kind of pushed to do sometimes, is to act like we can handle everything, because society has a, tricky way of making us feel like our emotions are a negative thing. So some women act like they don't have any. They try to act cold, and those are the ones that are usually the most emotional, the ones that try to act cold. Girl, you're not cold. Why would you want to be cold? Why? That's not a good thing. Okay, you're a beautiful, warm, loving woman. It doesn't matter what you look like. You're a beautiful, warm, loving woman. And emotions are beautiful. So feel them. Don't push them down, because that's how you become resentful and bitter. And that's something that's very difficult to shake, being a bitter woman. It's almost like a tattoo. Okay, you don't want to ever get into that zone. And you only get into the zone of bitter when you're not evaluating and feeling and releasing your emotions. Same thing with rage and outbursts and fighting. That happens when you're not dealing with your emotions. You're stuffing them down. Okay, so do not suppress your emotions, but it doesn't mean that you have to react right away. It just means that you're going to deal with them when it's appropriate. Do not be impulsive when you're emotional. This goes back to breaking up with your man, slashing tires, breaking windows. Those are all impulsive behaviors. That's you saying that you cannot control yourself, and so you're going to act out. And that's very childlike behavior, because they don't have the emotional regulation. As an adult, you do. So be careful. A lot of these impulses under emotional stress causes us to make very poor choices. That's how some of us end up sleeping with people we shouldn't be sleeping with, because we're upset or vindictive, and making a lot of life-changing choices. Don't be overly dramatic. And I have to smile, because this is the one that I struggle with sometimes. When things happen, you don't have to turn it into a soap opera, into a saga. Oh my God, I can't believe what he did to me. It doesn't have to be that big. Because the thing is, when you do that, many times you end up injuring yourself. So you may think that it's fun to be dramatic about it. It's fun to just make it way bigger than it is, so it can just be this like dramatic life story. But really, you're injuring yourself. You're feeling more pain or more hurt than you need to feel. And of course, it gets worse when you want to repeat the story 1,000 times. So maybe something happened to you that was really, really bad, or you really didn't like something someone did. And so you're all dramatic about it, right? You blow it up, you add things to it that didn't even happen, or you create things in your mind that weren't really there because that's how you were feeling. And then you go tell 10 people. That's not healthy. You don't need to keep telling people about things when they happen to you. You can express yourself to people that you trust and love, but you don't have to repeat it to 5 different friends. If you had something, an upset with your spouse or your child or your parents, you don't have to tell every single one of your friends. You don't. That's actually very destructive, because people can't be trusted. And not only that, you become an emotional burden to people. Your friends aren't responsible for your emotions either. They're your friends. They're going to be there to listen, but they're not responsible for your emotions. And if you have a pattern of relying on your friends to kind of doctor you up, and you have a lot of emotional issues, your friends are going to start to disappear. I have released a number of women from my life because they were an emotional burden for me. And it's unfortunate, because I love these ladies. They're wonderful people, and it's not their fault that they, have all these emotional issues, but I can't have that in my life. Okay? And that is something everyone has a right to do, to cut you off. because you cannot handle yourself emotionally. And I hate to say that, but everyone has that choice. It is toxic. If you're not self-aware and if you're not having your emotions addressed and relying on your friends or your family or your coworkers to constantly have to emotionally support you, it's toxic. And no one wants that in their life. So you have to regulate that. And the best way to do it is by pretending that you're on the receiving end. How would you feel if someone was calling you every week complaining about their husband? Or calling you every week complaining about their job? Or calling you every week crying about something? It's toxic. Okay, so you have to put yourself in their position and think, would I want this done to me? What is this friendship really based off of? Is it based off of drama? Is it based off of your drama? Do they even get a chance to ever talk about their stuff? Or are the conversations always very dark because it's always about something negative or sad? Okay, this is something you're responsible for regulating. Another emotional don't is being overly emotional in front of your children. Now, it's important for your children to know that you're a human being and that you go through different emotions. Mommy is not always going to be happy. Sometimes mommy is sad. Sometimes mommy's a little worried or scared. That's good for them to see it because they need to see that you're a human. That's so, so important. I think that a lot of parents don't do that enough because they want to protect their children and allow their children to think that they're superwoman and that they can handle everything. But then what happens when those children grow up and think that you were able to handle everything, but they can't handle a single thing? What's wrong with me, right? It's just not, you're doing them a disservice, you're hurting them. But it should be very, very minimal. Your emotional dysregulation can affect your children so much. These children do not need to be exposed to adult issues. They don't need to see you crying uncontrollably or enraged uncontrollably. That hurts them. Those poor children end up taking in all of your emotions and usually pretending that they're fine, and then it comes out later. It comes out in their academics. It comes out in their self-injurious behaviors that you may not know about. A lot of parents, especially parents who try to pretend like they're perfect, have no idea that their children are suffering. They're starving themselves. They're doing things like drugs and alcohol because they're trying to manage. Some of them are doing those things because they see you doing it. They see you drinking yourself to death because you had a bad day. Or literally see you say, "Oh, I had a bad day," and take out that drink, pour it, and throw it back. And they see it and they're like, "Oh, I guess it's what you do when you have a bad day." So then when they get older, when they have a bad day, they're at the bar first thing, right? You're teaching them. Be careful about how you manage your emotions around your children. They're watching you and they're subject to your emotional issues. If you had a bad day at work, you don't come home and take that out on your baby. As a mom who loves her child, you're going to feel bad about that afterwards. You're going to wish you didn't do it. And then you have to deal with that shame and that guilt that you did not act appropriately. It's such a nasty web. Allow your children to see you have emotion, but also allow them to see how you overcome that. Let them know that you have a relationship with God and God's gonna work it out. Let them see that confidence even through the pain. They need to see that, and it's important for you, but do not take your emotions out on your children. Another emotional don't is bringing your emotions to work. Your job is not the place for your feelings. And if you work with children, you should be extremely mindful of your emotions because they, again, have to take that in, and that is not okay. Your emotions don't belong at work. If you're having a bad day, if you had a fight with your husband, if you're having issues with money, your job is not the appropriate place for you to be emotionally reacting to those things. If you're having that bad of a day, then call off. Take a day off then. One day, not a whole week, one day. But don't go to work and mistreat customers, roll your eyes at people, have a nasty attitude with people because you're going through something. Everyone is going through something. It doesn't matter how beautiful, how polished, how rich None of that matters. Everyone is going through something. We just all had different life experiences. And it's so unfair for you to put your emotional baggage onto other people and mistreat them because of what you're feeling. It hurts. It's not to say it doesn't hurt. It does hurt. But your job is not the place for you to show that. They're paying you. You are being paid to do something. You have a certain ethic that you have to live up to. When you were hired for that job, you were selected. And in that selection process, it was already assumed at the very minimum that you know how to manage your emotions. Okay, and this is something that is so important because so many of us lose jobs just because of something that we said, just something that came out of our mouth, and it could have been triggered by something completely unrelated that had nothing to do with work, or maybe it did have to do with work. Either way, you have to be able to manage your emotions. I don't want you to be crying at work. Crying at work is unacceptable. If you work in a professional environment, even if you don't, you can work in retail. You shouldn't be crying at work. It's inappropriate and it's unprofessional. If you need to cry, get off of work, take a break, go to your car and cry. But your coworkers should not see you doing that. Customers should not see you doing that, because not only does it affect your environment, it also affects the way that they see you. So in the future, let's say you applied for a certain position or a promotion or a leadership position, they're going to remember the day that you burst out crying over something. Okay? They're going to remember. People don't forget things like that, and they also talk about you, and we all know this. Okay, they're going to remember that and think that you're not able to manage your emotions well enough to handle certain responsibilities. So you will not be the first person that they think of. Just remove yourself from the environment, go cry in your car, fix yourself up, come back, and put on a good face, because that is the one place that you need to put on a good face. It's not about you at work. It's about whatever service you're providing. Now, if you're at work and you feel like you were wronged in some way, it was a legitimate wrong that was done to you, there's nothing wrong with feeling. Again, I want you to feel, but I want you to manage yourself. So there should be procedures in place for you to file formal complaints, for you to go through a process and get your needs met without the emotional drama. That emotional drama often stops people from taking you seriously, especially if you have a pattern of being emotionally dramatic. And I say this with all love, because I understand that a lot of times you may have been slighted. They may have been wrong. But how you handle it says a whole lot about the situation, unfortunately. People are going to look at you as the problem if you're the one that's emotionally out of control, especially if your reaction caused a ripple effect of more dramatic things to happen. Okay, so just watch it at work. That's the one place where I just really want you to watch it, because it's your livelihood. It's the difference between your child having food and not having food. Okay, so please be careful with your emotions at work. Another emotional don't is bringing other people to your emotional level to see them react. You trying to push people's buttons. That is absolutely unacceptable, especially if maybe you're dealing with someone who's trying to be more logical about whatever is going on, but you're so emotional that you don't appreciate their logic, so you want to bring them down to your level. For example, if someone's like, well, I just want to know why you're upset, because it doesn't seem like they pushed you. It seems like they asked you to move and you didn't move, so they walked around you and maybe they touched you. And you're like, what? You're stupid. You're a freaking idiot. You're the manager? They hired you to be the manager? That behavior where now you're just upset and you want them to be upset. So now you start insulting them and cursing at them and trying to bring them to an emotional reaction that matches yours, so that you can feel like, okay, now you get it. Now you're mad like me. Now we can talk. No, that is very emotionally immature. Logic is necessary. If something happened and a person's trying to solve the problem for you because you're upset, they're going to need to look at it from a logical standpoint before dealing with your emotions. Now, if you're blessed to be dealing with someone who displays femininity and is able to react to your reaction and say, you know what, I'm so sorry that you're upset, ma'am, but can you let me know what happened? Let's talk about this. and addresses your emotions immediately, well, that's a blessing. Most people don't do that. They want to get straight to the problem. So don't try to bring them to your emotional level. Now, this is a major issue in relationships because men are, more logical thinkers. So if there's an issue and you're getting real emotional about it, they're just trying to solve the problem. They're just like, okay, so wait, what are you upset about? And they just kind of want to fix it right away. And they may not address your emotional needs. They may not find the feeling. And that's what I always recommend men to do. Find the feeling. What is she feeling first? Address the feeling and then fix the problem. But men don't normally do that. So it's important that in relationships, you're not trying to get him to come down to your emotional level. If he's being himself and, being a logical problem solver and you're an emotional wreck in the moment, don't insult him and try to hurt him so that he can feel your pain. That's not necessary. You guys are operating on different systems, but that love is still there. There does have to be a compromise on both ends, on his end to be able to address and acknowledge your emotions, but you also have the responsibility at some point to see it from his logical perspective and actually be willing to solve the problem and not just stay in your emotions. They're both needed, and it's important that you don't ruin your relationships and hurt people's feelings because you want them to be upset with you. That is very emotionally immature, and that is a big don't because it can ruin everything that you've worked for. And in relationships, men are not going to stick around long for that. If you have emotional outbursts, if you jump to conclusions, if you try to hurt him or break up with him because you're in a mood, he will be gone. Okay? It doesn't matter how beautiful you are, he will be gone. Honey, no one deserves that treatment. And the people who can leave will leave if you make it a pattern. And the final emotional don't that I really want you to be aware of is the use of social media. Social media is a huge emotional trigger for people because we just don't know what to expect. All you have to do is open up that Facebook app and see your crush getting married to someone, and that can send you into a whole emotional spell, right? Not only is it a trigger, it's also a place where people act up emotionally. Don't go online and post things when you are angry or when you are sad. That is not the time to start ranting. Those things are permanent. All someone has to do is screenshot it, and that's it. Everything you work for can be ruined in that moment because you were out of control online thinking that it's free range. It's not. You're responsible for everything you do. Everything you say, everything you write, everything that's connected to you is yours. Although it may seem like you can get away with it because you're encouraged to kind of like express yourself on social media, how you express yourself can have very serious consequences. So don't go online and say hateful and mean things to people, post things that you're going to regret posting later, or even go as far as to bullying people, impersonating people, and doing just very outrageous things online. You are being watched, okay? You may not think you're being watched, but you have a creator. This world is not all fun and games, honey. You're going to be accountable for your behavior. You don't get away with anything. Everything has consequences, whether they're positive consequences or negative consequences. You reap what you sow, and even if you're behind a username or a fake page, you're still being accounted for, and it's going to come back to you. It's not worth it. If there's something that frustrates you or legitimately puts you in rage, find a way to put that information out there in a way that's beneficial to people, in a way that teaches people, in a way that helps people. It's always about the intentions behind your actions. It's okay to feel emotions. It's okay to be angry. It's just the way that you deal with that. That is what's important. As a psychologist, of course, I'm very empathetic and aware that many of you ladies are battling mental illnesses. You're struggling with illnesses that you may not even know you have. They may not even have been identified yet. You may not be able to regulate your emotions because there's something chemically happening in your brain. And it's painful because you don't want to experience that, and you certainly don't want the people around you to have to experience it. But in order for you to evolve and take control of you, you have to take care of that. You have to take the steps to get yourself the assistance that you need. This is something I'll discuss in my part 2, where I talk about all of the emotional do's, all the things that I want you to do when you do feel these feelings and you do come to a place where you're ready to take control of your emotions. I just want you to know how much I love and appreciate every single one of you ladies. I know this information was not the easiest to hear, especially if you deal with a lot of emotional dysfunction within yourself, but this is just the beginning. This is a beautiful moment for you to be able to start creating an emotional plan, so that way you can have that power and control over the things that you say and the things that you do, so that you don't ruin everything that you've worked so hard for. Now, if you have a specific question for me, something that you're burning to know and you want me to answer your question, then leave me a voice message. I'm gonna link it below. You can leave me a voice message and I will answer your question on my podcast. I appreciate every single one of you spending time with me today and taking in all of this knowledge. I hope that all of this information was helpful to you. Please leave me a comment about anything that may have resonated with you or touched you in this video. Thank you for all of your encouragement, and thank you for being dedicated to yourself. Thank you for wanting to be a better person and wanting to be better for you, your family, and for the world. I really want you to get the best out of life, and the only way you can do that is by mastering yourself first. And that starts with mastering your emotions. So I cannot wait to see you next time. Thank you so much for being here. I love you so much, and I'll see you in the next video. Big kisses. Mwah. Peace, love, and light.